Welcome to the latest edition of Backchat from the Arc in Headingley, and as we enter this new era of Super 8s, we're joined by a less than fabulous three. Danny Lockwood, who's the proprietor of League Weekly newspaper, Chris Irvin from The Times and Sunday Times, and Phil Kaplan from 4020 magazine. So fellas, there's only one place to start, the Super 8s. What have we made of it so far, Danny?
Yeah, an exciting start. I thought Wigan and Huddersfield kicked it off in great style, cracking game. Plenty of promise there. I think they'll be definitely in the running in another 7 or 8 weeks. But I think the real story for me, Woodsy, is Leeds Rhinos and their catch me if you can impression, because the way they dismantled, you know, a Warrington side that was a little bit light on numbers, but still you'd expect to be more competitive than that. I thought Leeds have put the marker down. St Helens will be disappointed with the way they went down at Catalan, not just the fact that they lost, because we know that on their home turf they're a different side of the Dragons, but they've, you know, they'll be a little bit disappointed about that. And another cracking game, Castleford and Hull. Castleford aren't going away anytime soon, and they'll have one or two tricks up the sleeves for anybody that takes them for granted.
But Leeds have set the benchmark, haven't they, in these Super 8s so far. And that game when they destroyed Warrington 49-10, can't go without mention of Zach Hardacre and his two magnificent tries, but he's just on fire. So is Callum Watkins. Tom Briscoe's been off a long time, but he's back, as you know, to the manor born. They look a sensational side at the moment. They're going to take some stopping. They're 3 points ahead of Saints and then a point ahead of Wigan. But I think Leeds, it's who's going to catch Leeds at the moment.
But there is a slight cloud on their horizon. That's the injury to Paul Ayton, because a lot of the tempo at the beginning of matches has come from him. But I think we'll be in the area soon when we're talking about potential man of steel. And if that is someone who's had the greatest influence on the sport, then it would have to be Adam Cuthbertson this year, because he's revolutionised the way that Leeds have played. I mean, he's 110 offloads or something.
He's gone back to the future.
Yes, he's a throwback, but actually he's taken the game to another level this year. And I think, again, that's what's exciting about the way Leeds are playing at the moment. They've got this strike at the back, but they've now got somebody in the middle of the field that is giving them tremendous ball.
Do you think we might see? Kevin Sinfield spending a little bit more time in the number 9 role? I know there isn't one as such these days, Phil, but I've always thought he performed best for England. Did Sinfield when he was right at acting halfback? I think he has done it in the past.
Well, I think by losing Ayton, you also lose the power of bringing Rob Burrow off the bench. So again, if Burrow's going to play most of the 80 minutes, then I think you need to perhaps withdraw him from the hooking role so that he can then go back in and have the usual impact that he does, and Sinfield would be the obvious replacement.
The kind of niggle at the back of the mind with Leeds is obviously going back 10 years to 2005. They were, you know, really in for all the competitions, but all the injuries came at the wrong time for them, and it severely compromised them. But they do look a team apart at the moment. It's a long way to go.
But they've staffed up. I mean, that back division of Leeds is just absolutely stellar. It is head and shoulders the best in the competition, and like you say, I think Callum Watkins is we all knew how good he was, but he really has grown into his own boots this year. But I think where Leeds have made the big difference, quite apart from the qualities that Cuthbertson brings, is in, if you like, bulking up the pack. They've made the right signings. They've promoted Brad Singleton, who I know has signed on for another long-term contract, just at the time that JP and Kylie Luluwai really needed it.
I think the other impetus has been Mitch Garbutt, who had his best game against Warrington, his first start, 250 odd metres. I think to bring somebody in of that size and bulk that takes the pressure off the older with great respect
That's where
guys.
they looked vulnerable, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's a bit like 2004 when they brought in Ali Lawatiti. Different sort of player, but it just gives a lift to the dressing room.
We're in danger probably of name-checking them all, but I'm going to name-check one player. I think that's Carl Ablett. I just think he's sensational week in, week out, whether he's playing at centre or whether he's playing in the second row, hanging out wide. He's so creative. He's such a creative force, Carl Ablett, and I think he's to me, he epitomises the Rhinos.
And defends on the same side as Joel Moon, who we haven't mentioned either, but we just did.
There's going to be a Leeds squad.
Danny Maguire, Danny Maguire.
And they still won't get a man of steel.
Well, I mean, they're good to watch as well, aren't they? I mean, that's the difference. I mean, you'd say in the past, Leeds knew how to win at this stage of the season because of Kevin Sinfield's kicking game and grinding it out in the professionalism. They've still got that ability, but they're actually, if you were a neutral, they'd probably at the moment be the team you'd pay to go and watch.
You don't know where to pick. There's no part of their game that you can pick on, and I think in the past there probably has been.
Well, they passed 800 points this week, and no other teams got past 680 or something. So that's the level of entertainment that they're providing this season. And that's what people want to see.
Just a final word on Leeds, because we can dominate the whole show with it, but just a final word on Leeds. for me, and I know this is going to be a big argument, and I know there's people in higher places to make this decision, but for me, Zach Hardacre is England's number one.
I believe he is. I mean, but that is going to be the big debate going into that Kiwi series. Is it going to be Tompkins, or is it going to be Hardacre?
Well,
unfortunately,
after the way you saw them get beat 36-0 at the weekend,
the trouble is, the England coach resides 10,000 miles away in Sydney. And I hope all the tapes of Zach Hardacre are getting to him, and that Jimmy Lowe's, the newly appointed assistant coach, is winging many a telegram his way saying, you know.
More significantly, Paul Wellens, who's a very senior member of that coach.
And there has to be a fullback and happens to rate Zach
who was
Hardacre
tweeting
very
after the game, singing Zach Hardacre's praises and says that he's been the best fullback this season.
Yeah, but if you remember, before the World Cup, they tried Zach Hardacre in the centre, which of course was the position he started off in. I just hope we don't go down that road.
You're losing there, don't you? Right, so that's Leeds. Who's going to, if anyone's going to catch them, who's going to catch them? You look at St Helens against Catalan, disappointing. Wigan, slow start, but showed a lot of character against Huddersfield. Are they the only two now who can possibly deny Leeds the grand final victory?
I think so. I think it's between Leeds, St Helens and Wigan. It's not insignificant, is it, Dave, that those three teams are ahead at the top. Yeah. And that does bring some questions of the Super 8 format into, there's some live questions there at the same time. And because I think for the next 2 months, maybe 2, maybe 3 teams are fighting over the 4th playoff place as well. But those 3 are quite a way ahead now.
I think you'd say so.
I'm not sure. I think the new format where you go straight into a semi-final, there is an opportunity for a team like a Huddersfield or a Castleford, maybe particularly Castleford on the basis of their experience last year. If they can get into 4th and they've got 80 minutes going to the team that's first with no pressure on them, there is an outside chance that, as we've seen with St Helens in the past...
That's always been the way, hasn't it? That's always been the way, though. With semi-finals, there is going to be a chance.
But the team that finishing 4th doesn't now have to go through a couple of away games to get to hit the team that's
if anybody has a run of form right now, and we've seen this throughout the season, because everybody's had a 3 or 4 week patch where they've been red hot and they've been absolutely freezing cold, then that will swing all the pendulums around. The one thing, and I know we've dealt with Leeds, but we saw what happened to them last year after they won the Challenge Cup. The wheels dropped off the wagon completely. And
I think they'll use that.
Well, you'd like to think that with that sort of bogeyman out of the way, because they were just so intent on getting the Challenge Cup. This is Sinfield and Peacock's swan song, if you like. I'd like to think that won't happen again. I don't think it will.
The other thing about Saints and Wigan in particular, and others as well, is that they're probably quite happy at this stage for Leeds to do this, and they're to travel under the radar for a few weeks. They won't mind, because as Phil rightly says, it comes down to those semi-finals. But I think home advantage, 1 and 2, you do get home advantage, and that is an absolute.
Well, there's still a first place to play for, and Wigan's. I mean, if Wigan beat Leeds this weekend, then they're in prime position to finish in first place. Well, they're level on points with Leeds, aren't they? And a poor points difference, but I think there's still a lot.
And there's a greater incentive to finish top as well.
It's not done and dusted by any means. We're week 1 in, and we're all excited about the prospect of what lies ahead. But I think it will come down to which team hits form and keeps that momentum up. And I'd like to think that Castleford will be thinking, we're going to get in
their game tonight against Warrington is key to that. They need to win that game. And last time they played Warrington, they took a hell of a shellacking, 44-6 at home.
Yeah.
So
and they go to Huddersfield, so their destiny is very much in their own hands, but they're going to have to be good to get 4th.
And you say about hitting form, by definition, you're going to have to hit form to finish in 4th place. So the team who finishes 4th is going to have a bit of momentum on their side, aren't they?
That's right.
Yeah, and Wembley is going to be an issue because obviously Leeds are going to be involved in a high-profile, high-intensity, energy-sapping game where all of their rivals are having the week off. And again, that might be factored in afterwards. Leeds play St Helens on the Friday after Wembley. Could be a very intriguing game.
One thing we said before the 8s began was if there's a flaw in the system, it's the likes of Hull and Catalan finishing 7th and 8th. They lose the first couple of games, they've nothing left to play for. Someone pointed out if that's the only flaw, it's not a bad system, which is a fair enough argument. But full marks to their integrity. Catalan for their victory over St Helens and Hull for the battle they put up against Castleford.
They're spoilers, aren't they? They're there to make sure that they throw a spanner in somebody else's works. The shame for a team like Catalan is that last year they went on a great run when the playoffs started, won away at Leeds, won away at Huddersfield, were competitive for half of a game at St Helens, were effectively 40 minutes from a grand final. I don't think they can do that this year because of the points they need to make up, but we've got a rolling story, and every week they win, they're still in touch with that top 4.
Yeah.
So I think, again, that's where it perhaps does work, that they now go to Huddersfield in a must-win game. They've got more must-win games, but they're still in the frame.
And that's why it's an improvement to last year, because you finished 7th and 8th, and yeah, you playoffs, and that's celebrated, and then they're sacrificial lambs to whoever they play away from home. So
there are no knock-off games anymore, are there? You know, you can't go to Hull and expect
unless
an easy
a team is out of it completely, and then I think possibly there is, but we're not at that stage or anywhere near.
We're a long way off that.
But even if a team's out of it, 2 of them have still got to go to Catalan, and that's one of the hardest places to go to at a difficult time of the year, when travel arrangements aren't easy, at short notice, with a turnaround to come and play another great team. So they are still going to have a say in this.
Catalans have said they're going to change their arrangements. Beforehand, they've come in and gone to a hotel and done this. They're going to do like St Helens did. I don't think it did St Helens much good the other night, but go in and out and try that way. Because away from home, they just cannot win, can they? They look so formidable at home, generally, as they did again on Saturday night, and then they come here and they're meek and mild and just seem to cave in.
What about the Warrington quandary? Because I just would love to know what's going on in that club at the moment. We know that they were down a couple of guys at the weekend, and they've brought Chris Sandow in, and we were all sort of crossing our fingers that here was the next coming, and it a hit and miss.
It wasn't the right environment for him to stamp his
authority.
It wasn't,
and he wasn't quite fresh off the plane, Dave. But even so, to me, there's just something missing at the heart of the Warrington team this season. And you look at that front row of Sims, Hill and Das Clark, and you'd put that in any team in the world, I would argue. But at the moment, there's just something missing, and they still are a team that should be thinking we're going to finish top 4.
Their fundamental problem all season has been at half-back. Tony Smith has chopped and changed, but fundamentally, Chris Sandow, long term, offers them some real, he's a very enigmatic character, and on his day, such a great player. And there were little signs, I thought, early on. And I think Warrington, I think they have an eye on 2016 now. Well, I think they've already...
You don't think it'll come soon enough for them then, Chris?
I don't think they're going to do anything this year. I think it's all about building for next season.
His kicking game was very good in the opening 20 minutes. He was putting them around the field where they need to be. And there were a couple of hints with his interaction with Stephen Ratchford that looked as though, would you move Ratchford to stand off and have that as your half-back
vocal on the pitch, isn't he? He's so vocal on the pitch.
And I think the two of them might work together. But in the cup semi-final that they lost, I don't know if it was me, but Warrington just seemed like a collection of quality individuals against just a very competitive team. And it was the team ethic that won that day. And that's how Warrington have come across this year, that when it clicks, it's great. But too often they're relying on an individual spot of brilliance rather than the team.
I think
apart from Chris Hill, who's been absolutely superb.
And he's late from the front. But I do think that there is that spirit of leadership that they had under Lee Brares and Michael Monaghan. And I think, having someone like Joel Monaghan as a captain out on the wing can be a bit of an issue. And I just think sometimes there's nobody to grab hold of them in the middle of the park, shake them up and say, come on boys, we need to dig deep.
But as I say, I'm sure all Warrington fans would disagree, but I do think they've got an eye on 2016. They've signed a great winger. I think Tom Lynham's going to be a fantastic signing for them. I think Warrington will come good. And Sandow's over early, so that process has already started.
I think the other encouraging thing for Warrington is the number of young kids that they're now starting to bring through and give first-team experience. So Ben Curry, Joe Philbin, King brothers. There's a core there of young players now who are getting vital experience, and they are going to be a threat in the years to come.
Well, we shall see. Huddersfield, can you see them making...
I can, but it's all about Danny Brough with Huddersfield, isn't it? I know they've sort of introduced Jamie Ellis this year, and there's a little bit of a plan B, if you like, going on. But I thought that against Wigan, I thought they were too reliant on Ellis on that right side, and I think if you take the ball away from Danny Brough, Huddersfield are only half the team.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I sat watching that game with Kevin Brown, and he was remarking early on when Huddersfield were doing really well, he said they're actually playing away from Danny Brough. He said, I don't know whether it's on purpose or not, they're playing away for Danny Brough, and Wigan aren't reading that, and that's why they prospered like they did in the early stages.
But when it got down to the last sort of 10 minutes, when they'd given up that 10-point lead, they found themselves 18-10 behind, twice they dragged their way back into it, did Huddersfield. But that last 10 minutes, when you really wanted the go-to man to come to the fore, and it is Danny Brough more than anybody in the competition, I would argue. Whether he was off his feed, whatever the problem was, it just wasn't coming his way.
The half-back who prospered in that game was George Williams. And I think he's got to be given Sean Wayne a lot of plaudits here. He said from the outset, I'm going to stick with this kid. He's only 20, 21. I'm going to stick with this kid. He's done that through thick and through
a little
thin.
bit of thin, but
I just thought, you saw in George Williams a real talent as well, and you know, he created all the tries and scored a great one himself. He is a kid really to keep an eye on for the future.
Yeah. And again, that's really interesting, because I was listening to a senior ex-pro, I won't name because it was a private conversation, but a senior ex-pro who said the problem we have in this country in terms of developing halfbacks is we don't keep faith with them. You know, the glaring mistakes of a halfback are seen by everybody rather than a second rower or a prop, so they get highlighted. It crushes their confidence. We shift them to full back, or we shift them to the wing or whatever. We don't keep faith in them, and George Williams so far is the perfect example of keep faith with a halfback.
Absolutely.
And I think that's Sean Wayne's philosophy as well. I mean, he's steeped in the academy structure. He brought up, you know, the Chris Ashtons and people like that. So I think Sean Wayne has the right mindset there as well. And I think showing faith in a player like George Williams is very, very important.
Well, I mean, Lee Gaskell's potentially a perfect example of this, isn't it? St Helens got rid, he's gone to Bradford. He's been a superstar at Bradford. Now, whether that's at that level, we'll only find out if they get into Super League next year.
I think Johnny Lomax is another example, isn't he? That when he first burst on the scene, we thought, here's him and possibly with Kyle Eastman was the future England pairing. And neither of them are playing in the halfbacks. One's not even in the sport anymore. So I think you're right. But Danny Maguire, again, going back to him, would be the classic example that when Leeds had Maguire and Burrow coming through, they did keep faith with them. And in the early years, they weren't winning things. And it is, as you say.
Leeds were looking that way with Liam Sutcliffe this year, weren't they? And you know, and injuries can make a mess of the best laid plans. That's why we're not seeing anything of Johnny Lomax for pretty much 2 years now. You know, I thought Kevin Brown was a guy that has only really found his birth and his maturity and seniority and his ability to grab a game in the later years, whether that was just because his face didn't fit where he was early days. But George Williams is absolute proof that if you invest in quality for long enough, it will. And
I think this time next year we'll be talking about Liam Sutcliffe as well. You know, in those terms.
How many years have Hull been looking for a homegrown halfback and not had the patience to put a guy in there and actually allow him to develop? I hope with Jordan Abdul they may have somebody, although perhaps loose forward might be his better position. But they've been searching since Brough left in 2005.
Brough, Cook and Hall. That was.
It'll be interesting to see what kind of an impact Gaskell has on the middle eights. I know he was sensational at the weekend when they opened with a heavy win over Sheffield. I'd like to see how he goes when he comes up against Salford Widnes and this weekend Wakefield.
And will we be talking about Carl Eastman next year?
Well, the rumour mill was going in pretty much in overdrive on Friday night because Carl Eastman got cut, the first cut from the England Rugby Union World Cup squad, and some talk about maybe apparently he was very, very disgruntled at being cut by Stuart Lancaster, the England coach. And maybe he might want to come back to rugby league, and maybe Warrington might be a destination. But I think Bath, he's still under contract to Bath.
I'd be surprised.
They might have something to say about that.
Well, will we be talking about Carl Eastman in the next part of the programme? What will we be talking about? We haven't got a clue. Join us to find out in just a few moments' time. Welcome back to Backchat in the Arc in Headingley, and of course the Super 8 is not just about the top 8 and the race for the grand final, but that middle 8 as well, which a lot of people are saying is actually the most fascinating aspect of the whole thing. Phil, agree or disagree?
Yeah, I think it's rejuvenated the game, particularly among people who love rugby league. I'm not sure how much resonance it's made outside of that. There's intrigue, there's jeopardy, which is what we wanted. There's a rolling narrative as well.
A rolling narrative? I like that.
I don't think you can read too much into week one. There are a lot of people who looked at the results, particularly Lee's defeat, went, oh, that's it, they can't possibly get promoted. I don't think any of that's right. I think we're still working towards this £1 million game, which is 4th v 5th, which theoretically is the lower ranked Super League team against the highest ranked Championship team. I think every week now we've got games that we actually want to take some kind of notice of, rather than go, oh well, that one's a foregone conclusion. And I think the first week proved that. In fact, if anything, the game that made the most impact in terms of how this middle 8 may go was actually Halifax against Widnes. Because the top-ranked team played the bottom-ranked team, and for, 75 minutes, there was 4 points between them. And I think Halifax are a part-time side that we've said probably won't be involved in a promotion shake-up, and maybe themselves don't even want to be at this stage. They're building. Widnes, who we think will retain their Super League status on the basis of the fact that they've got 4 games at home on their pitch and a great record, really struggled to beat a championship side.
Was that not just Halifax's cup final?
It felt I was there at the show on Sunday, and it felt like a cup tie, and it felt like something quite special from a Halifax point of view. And they rattled witness. I mean, they really did. I mean, it was 0-0 at half time with 3-4 minutes to go. It was only 4-0. The trouble was, where the difference was, that Halifax, they put everything in. Dane Manning was absolutely tremendous in the second row for them, but they hit a brick wall when it came to that creativity and that class and a little bit of fitness at the end. But talking to Richard Marshall afterwards, the coach, he was thinking we can play better than this, and so they are still confident they can have a shake, and that's the beauty of this system.
There were some very good signs out of it, and I think we were always probably a little bit wary that a team like Leigh, as good as they've been, would probably hit a little bit of a brick wall in the last 10 minutes because they're just not used to playing at that same intensity for the full 80, which a team like Hull Kingston Rovers are. And that's what ultimately showed. And that's what happened as well at the Shea with Widnes. It was just that last 10 minutes. The danger, of course, is that there was a cup final mentality to it, that the championship teams are kind of like pouring everything into it right now and might be struggling towards the back end of the sort of 7 rounds. I hope not. I hope that
there might be an admission within the lower league clubs some lower league clubs that might be the case. But I think the principle has been established. I think the point Phil made as well is that within the sport ourselves we probably have grasped the concept. The problem with the system is, do people beyond rugby league actually understand what's going on? And I actually don't think they do.
Really. I don't know. I don't think that they care that much about it. There are some really good games going on, Chris, and I'd like to think that, for instance, this weekend, Bradford will put down a real marker against Wakefield, because for me the success of this whole process will be, and I might be just sort of living on a wing and a prayer and cross fingers and crossed everything, will be that either Leigh or Bradford or Halifax or Sheffield actually grab one of those top 4 spots.
I think the interesting thing with that is, though, what is the financial distribution next year? Because I think that's going to have implications. There are teams, particularly like Leigh and Bradford, who have set their stall out to be in Super League, as indeed Featherstone did to get into the top 4 in the Championship. If they don't achieve that, it would be a shame if by moving to this system we're going back to the old days of promotion relegation, where you get boom and bust that goes alongside it. We want to try and move away from that. Just thought the interesting thing with Leigh this week, who again have been piloted as the team most likely to, was that they had a couple of try-scoring opportunities that in the Championship I'm absolutely convinced they would have scored. There was a one-on-one tackle with Kieran Dixon and Greg McNally, and another one with Liam Kay, who's been on fire in the Championship this year. But I genuinely think I'd thought he'd scored and had no idea that Ken Sear was going to just block his space. And I think that's what Leigh will come to terms with.
And a couple of those Rovers tries as well were just... You wouldn't call them flukes because they were fantastic pieces of skill. But when you bust out from 95 yards, those really hurt, and that can, if you like,
but also the Championship teams have got to change a little bit the way they play. This is a different competition. So, 2 great passes wide and Leigh will score in the Championship. Bradford with a big set of forwards in the middle and Gaskill playing off the back of them. That's fine, with the greatest respect, when you're playing Workington or Whitehaven or Hunslet. You can't do that against Hull County. If the game starts to go away from you, what else have you got? It's great and exciting for us seeing expansive play, but the space isn't there.
I think the whole middle 8 concept of Super League qualifiers, that they're called, I just think it's given impetus at the right time of year. Usually we're flagging at this point, the summer, what we're going to do, we're waiting for Wembley and all the rest of it. It's just kind of giving some added impetus to the season. That's
and what it really does, we were talking in the first part about Leeds, can they be caught? Because of course they took that lead from the first 2/3 of the season into the sort of the Super 8s with them. Everybody starts with a clean sheet of paper in the middle 8s. So Bradford sit at the top of the pile at the moment.
Well, Wakefield fans who've had an abject season to endure now get almost half a new team and 7 games.
They're always playing for this, Phil. That's what the former coach said. They're playing for this. This is the time to come out to play.
Again, a lot of clubs in that middle 8 have signed players, which again, you wonder what will happen if they don't achieve their aim. But somebody like Mikey Seo has been brilliant for Wakefield. In fact, when he came on the field against Salford, he almost transformed the game himself. And when they took him off, that's when their intensity dropped a little bit. And I think we've got the chance to see, we've got Dane Nielsen hopefully making a debut for Bradford this week. I think it's intriguing for fans to see these new players and what they can do.
Runciman at Widnes with a couple of tries.
Yeah.
It is almost like the start of a new season, isn't it? Because we have got these new faces in.
I do think that we ought to look at the signing deadline for next year, because I think leaving it as late in the day as we have means that the teams who are the Wakefields, for instance, rebuilding almost entirely their squad, I think it does skew the playing field in the favour of those teams that finish at the
they're working
at the
with a
bottom
bigger
of Super
salary
League.
cap, aren't they?
They're working on a bigger salary cap. They've got more to play with. They literally can buy insurance that is not afforded to the Championship teams. And I don't think that as much as you say Dane Nielsen is coming on for Bradford, great signing for them. I can't wait to see the guy in action. I do think that their ability to bulk up is obviously far diminished, and I think that's
I think
a problem that needs
dual
addressing.
registration is the other side of that coin as well, isn't it? That a lot of players who've been playing in the Championship are now being denied the chance to do so, almost sitting out half a season, which seems to be ridiculous. You look at a team again like Hunslet, who are struggling to just stay now in that Championship division. It would appear that very few Leeds players are going to be playing for them in this part of the season, particularly a couple of young hookers with the injury to Paul Ayton. And again, that's skewing the competition a little bit. I think we need to decide whether we are or aren't having dual registration.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with that, as you say, picking up on that, you've got players who have been on dual registration who are now drawn back to their parent clubs, who, as you say, their season finishes in, July?
Yeah.
And they won't play again till February. And that's
nonsense.
I mean, well, I know we don't want players overplaying, but that's completely the wrong direction.
Well, that's one of the whole things about this new process, isn't it? We were always going to learn things on the hoof. You'd like to think that Red Hall is sitting down, someone at Red Hall sitting down with a tick list of, we can do this a little bit better, we can do that a little bit better, whether it's the signing deadlines, whether it's bolstering the funding to some of the teams that finish at 1 and 2, for instance, in the Championship, giving them a little bit more leeway to sign players, and of course what we do with these guys that are suddenly the season's finished halfway through the season.
I think there's a feel from some of the top clubs, particularly Warrington and Wigan, that they want to reintroduce some kind of a reserve grade. And I think there's a growing groundswell that that's what the sport needs to do, where participation is key, where too many players are dropping off at age 19 and not filtering back into the community game, where we need a robust competition, maybe at under 23 level, that players can come back into from injury to at least prove themselves for a couple of matches before they go back into first team. Then I think we are now realising what we've lost, and some of that needs to come back.
I think we've lost a generation of players with the way the sport cannot afford to do that. I mean, it struggles to attract athletes as it is. The good athletes we've got, we're going to keep, retain, and nurture. And I come back to the Jamie Peacock story. There's, for many players, it's a late maturation sport. The likes of Jamie Peacock could have been lost from this sport, and he's one of the greatest players we've ever had.
Yeah. Bring back the 18s, bring back the 18s. How important a win was it for Salford against Wakefield?
Yeah, it was, confidence-wise, certainly. A club that has appeared to be our weekly news story. Yeah. Who's going to tender their resignation this week, what's happening behind the scenes, Brian McDermott's outcry, perhaps on behalf of the rest of the game, as to what was going on there. Dr. Kukash's response saying it's none of your business. It's great copy, but I'm not sure it's been a great look for Salford this year.
I don't know if it is great copy anymore. I think the story's boring and dull.
Yeah.
But Salford Nation Street needs to stop, and the rugby needs to start.
But we saw a little bit of that at least. Rangi did the talking on both sides of the ball.
Good to see him. That was a great choice.
The guy is box office when he's playing like that. They needed that win critically. And I know that the back office drama with Yestin Harris is still rolling on like a coronation. It's like one of the Coronation Street stars that's gone on holiday and you never know when they're coming back. But the fact is, we're talking about the rugby now, and we all want to see Rangi playing well. We all want to see Salford doing what they should be doing.
So Yestin goes upstairs to his bedroom and comes down 2 years later looking like Ian Watson.
It comes out.
But it is the noises off, isn't it? At the AJ Bell, it's the noises off all the time that we hear. And there's just too much of that. It's need to concentrate on what important.
There is a hint of disrespecting the Yestin story, whichever side you're on. You would hope that by bringing Tim Sheens in, there's going to be an element of calm in the place. I'm not sure he knew exactly what he was getting into when he accepted the brief.
Is Tim Sheens going to be there in 2016, do you think?
Well, he said he's here till the end of the season, and we'll see what happens next.
And he said he put his hands up and said, "I don't pick the team. I don't coach the side.
Maybe
I'm just here to guide."
Maybe he'll go back to Australia.
Which is
maybe
the
he'll go back
ultimate
to Australia via Perpignan.
Well, he is still the Australia coach.
Even though they don't have a game for the
foreseeable
future.
They don't play for many years.
I think we're expecting something out on that in the next few weeks.
Yeah, you could be the Australian coach at the moment. It wouldn't make much difference, would it?
They wouldn't lose under me, that's for sure, would it?
No.
100% record.
Not this year, they wouldn't.
No.
Hull Kingston Rovers, big Wembley date ahead of them now. So it's a really tricky time for them, this stage of the season, isn't it?
It is, but I think they're dealing with it well. I mean, they dealt with it well. Well, they didn't deal with it well in the first half at the Leeds Sports Village, but they dealt with it well in the second half. Yeah. And I think, you know, they've got some confidence and they've got some belief, but they haven't got Albert Kelly, and that, I think, for Wembley is going to be a problem. I'm sure there'll be will he, won't he? But he seems to have done a knee ligament injury. You know,
I wonder how much of that is just Hull KR playing it a little bit.
It would be a very dangerous game if they did. Have they not heard of Gavin Miller?
Yeah, exactly. yeah. So there's some precedent there in that respect.
Maurice Blair looked good at the weekend.
I think
he stood up for them.
You're right to mention, though, that it does throw a bit of a spanner in their works, because Wembley is a highly emotional occasion. Yeah. You're either dealing with the euphoria of victory and coming down very quickly to play a league game that's actually more important in the ultimate scheme of things, or you're dealing with intense disappointment having built up to that day. But I think that win at Lee was significant, because I think they will win the games at home, I think, with that great crowd behind them. And I think just beating the top championship team away probably does enough to take the pressure off a little bit.
And it gets to Wembley. What I'd really like to see, a player I love watching, he's got some defensive vulnerabilities, but with the ball in hand, when he sets off, Kieran Dixon has got to be the most exciting thing on two legs in rugby league. He really is so quick. And I'll tell you what, Wembley just might make. I'd love to see that kid score a try or two at Wembley. And he comes from that, from that neck of the woods as well.
Fans there.
He's a great story and he's a great talent, but the problem that they have is that they're playing Leeds Rhinos. and I just fear that we'll get what we got last year, which is as great a story as Castleford were. You got the sense on the day that getting to Wembley was their Wembley.
I'm not sure.
And they didn't turn out the same. And I just hope that Hull KR don't do that. I hope they come with a little bit more about them.
Well, I think
and shake the Rhinos up.
They have to, because that's the way they play. They're a very attack-minded team, and maybe, as you say, those wide open spaces will suit them. The new Wembley is crying out for a classic final. We haven't had one yet. We've had some interesting ones, but
Wigan Leeds was good in 2011. That was a good final.
Yes, it was okay, but we haven't had one where the neutral can sit there and just admire the attacking skills on offer. You've got two teams that really love to use the ball. So I think Wembley could be a great occasion.
Maybe it'd be a bit like the first round match. It was 40-30, wasn't it?
Well,
at the KC Lightstream to Leeds. Maybe 40-30.
We could handle a shootout as long as there's not more than a score in it all the way through.
The danger is that if Leeds play like they've been playing at the moment, it could be a final that's over after 20 minutes.
It could be another 1999. Well, London Broncos scored early in that final, but ultimately got blown away.
The interesting thing about Hull KR this year is that they've conceded about 30 points a game in Super League. They're about 16 in the Cup. They've got a real defensive mentality, and a lot of that seems to come from Willie Poaching. He's been the guy who's been credited, certainly the victory over Wigan and over Warrington in the semi-final, with coming up with a game plan on a specific day to neutralise the team, because he's got links with the Rhinos. Yeah. So there's intrigue everywhere, isn't it? Jamie Peacock with a foot in both.
There's that little bit thing with them. Maybe they've got the cup in their hands. I don't know. That they were under the cosh at Bradford and they won there. Then they go to Wigan and win that fantastic achievement, and then they go and duff Warrington. The
great thing is we've got a genuine underdog, and with the greatest respect to Castleford last year, they were on a par with Leeds when we went into that final. This is a team that finished 10th. Yeah. When was the last time that happened at Wembley, where the neutral could really get behind a genuine underdog, which is what sport's all about, particularly
I'm sure Hull FC fans might disagree.
Well, it's their worst nightmare, isn't it?
Well,
they'll be going away for the weekend.
As much as they're going to miss Albert Kelly, if indeed they end up doing, it could also be a mixed blessing, because defensively he's very susceptible to being targeted, and I love to watch the guy play. I'd pay money to watch Albert Kelly. I think he's a real talent, and I think they will. If they don't have him, they're going to have to find a way to score that I, at the moment, can't see coming.
But I mean, Gary Schofield sits in that chair very often, and he will tell you he's a half-back. He's not being paid to make tackles.
Yeah, well,
because Gary was a half-back.
The game is littered with great half-backs who can't tackle.
Yeah, well, you've got to find a way of effectively hiding them in that case, Dave. And so far, Chris Chester hasn't found exactly where he can hide Albert Kelly effectively.
I think Leeds, and they won there last year. The bogey was put to rest after the 15-year quest. That was put to rest. You know, they couldn't win at Wembley. Now they can. I think that will be in there. That's in their DNA now. And maybe it is early days, and they could go for all 3 trophies and lose the lot. You know, do it in 2005. But I think they will go in heavy favourites, and personally I think they will justify.
It's also how you handle that favourites tag, because Leeds of old thrive under, again, being the underdog in any final. You know, they've rarely gone into even the grand finals that they've won with anybody saying they're genuine title hopes.
Happened in 2005 against Hull as well, didn't they?
So I think, again, they're carrying something this year which hasn't sat comfortably with them in the past. The difference this time are the players who are leaving.
I'll get my wallet out there. Me and you will have a little side bet.
This Leeds team, this team of a generation that is starting to, again, transmogrify into something else, they like targets. They like to create history. There's only one piece of history at Leeds that they can get now. No Leeds team has ever won the double.
Yeah.
They won't say that publicly, but they know that.
OK, well, join us again. Second half, third half even, third part of Back Chat. We're back in just a moment. The only programme on Rugby League television that uses the word transmogrify. See you in a few moments' time. Welcome back to the third and final part of this week's Back Chat, and as traditionally we do, let's turn our attentions to life down under, the NRL. They're about to sign a new big TV deal, aren't they, with more free-to-air rugby league on in Australia, Channel 9, and more money in the coffers, and the ARL get more control of the game. Is it all good news?
I think for Australian Rugby League it is. I mean, you know, we're talking £1 billion or something like that. It's huge. The salary cap's going to keep going up. I think that good players here who might want to go to Australia, there's going to be more financial incentives for them to go, and that's going to pose a risk to the Super League as well. But in terms of the Australian competition, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It was always the case, wasn't it, that the money, the big bucks, were actually in the British game, but that's now long gone. And the Australian game, on the back of big TV audiences, that's they're the best TV audiences in Australia. The game just gets bigger and bigger, and for those playing it, happy days.
Blows our marquee player ruling out of the water, takes it to another level. I think again most of the England team will end up playing over in Australia, the younger element of it. Interesting that there's an acknowledgement that the international game is very important, but taking it out of the season. But the thing that I think is the most interesting in the small print is they're actually reducing the number of games. It's only by 1 round, but it's an acknowledgement that the top players play too much. And I think that's something that we need to be looking at. You mentioned it earlier on that there's a checklist going on at Red Hall. What do we need to do to alter the game? We need to play fewer games, and they've recognised that.
Yeah, I mean they do it superbly well. After the Super Bowl, what the Aussies do with their grand final and even the Origin climax is showtime, and I have to take your hat off to them. I do agree with Phil about the marquee player rule. There would have been some long faces around the boardrooms of Super League when they saw the kind of numbers that were being bandied about with the new TV deal, because all of a sudden you've put another 100 grand on any marquee signing that you wanted to get. And you have to ask what incentive there is, unless we're going to get guys that are 33 and 34 saying, well, I'll come over here for a paycheck at the back end of my career and an extended holiday. That is the one thing that we don't want, though, Phil.
Well, I don't know if Cameron Smith decided he wanted to spend a couple of years over here, if a club needed a hooker, say. I think A, would be bums on seats, and B, I think that would be a really good way of making a contribution. Danny Baderas did similar towards the end of his career and ended up winning a grand final. So I think there are some players that will still be available, and the marquee rule could be useful. But I just think this takes Australia to a completely different level, and I think they're looking at taking more and more games on the road. They say there's a capacity in this new deal, and this is only half of it, the £1 billion. There's all the other rights that go along with it, probably take it up to £2 billion. They're talking about the possibility of bringing in a 17th team, of taking an NRL game to China, of taking Origin every third year out on the road, be it to Melbourne or Perth or New Zealand or London. I think there is a realisation now that they need to go out and sell with this money behind.
But that's very, very laudable, but that's selling the NRL brand. It's not selling the brand of International Rugby League. And I think that is going to suffer even more. And there's the talk about one of the sacrifices will that be the mid-season test between the Aussies and Kiwis, that will go.
But that might be good for us because we might end up playing the Kiwis.
Well,
in
if
that
we
window.
do, that would be great.
But you know,
but that's
fair
taking
enough.
the Australians out of the equation again, isn't it?
That is not the international argument, is it? The international argument requires Australia, the Kangaroos, the Green and Golds to be out there active every year. You know, we know they've got into this habit now of having a fallow year between World Cups. You know, that kind of threw a spanner in the works of the ideas of a British Lions tour, which most traditionalists, and I count myself as one, would still love to see back on the table. But we're certainly looking down the road at 2019, 2020. It's too much, it's too far. There's a generation of fans that have grown up and not understanding this part of our heritage. And the Aussies are, frankly, to blame for it.
Well, you can't keep saying we could bring a team over that's 3 or 4 deep NRL-wise and not do it. If the top stars don't want to play, if the top 20 don't come, bring number 21 to 40. They'll still be very good and we'd still love to see them. So I think you're right, they can't abdicate their responsibility. Take the elite players out of the programme and bring even a development Australian squad. They'll still be very, very good.
And you see a lot of Australians bleating about Sam Burgess, you know, come back Sam, come back Sam. Sam Burgess went to rugby union for the international dimension. Yeah. That's what he didn't go there to play for Bath. I mean, he did go to play for Bath and a very good club as well. But the point is that it's the international dimension that attracted him. And, you know, it was obviously said to him, you're going to be part of this World Cup. And he's going to be part of this World Cup setup, it looks like. He's going to play at Twickenham, at inside centre, on Saturday in France in the first of the warm-up games. You know, from a rugby league perspective, it's like it's... Why? Well, it's a tragedy, but it's the international game that the Australians are abdicating responsibility for.
But it gets us talking, at least Sam playing in a rugby union shirt gets us talking about rugby league. And I know that he's been greatly missed, certainly by his club, South Sydney.
Oh, massively, yeah.
And it may well be, if this weekend's experiment fails, that we might have Sam back sooner than we thought. I don't think we'll be having him back into Super League, by the way. But the Aussies made some great sounds earlier in the season when they appointed Shane Richardson to the head of development. They beat the drum for internationalism. We're going to have a look outwards and beyond. I just so hope that they take proper internationalism with them and not just the NRL.
The positive is that they've enshrined the Pacific Tests. They're now going to move the second Origin game to a Sunday, and that is going to be a representative weekend. That might be where England play the Kiwis, but what we have got is the 4 Pacific nations having guaranteed tests on that weekend. So that's good. And I think they've brought into the expanded World Club Series a lot more for next year than they did this year. I think there's already 12 teams that have said they'd be interested in coming over. I think that is now seen as an event. The Auckland 9 is enshrined as an event. It's a sort of a club international event. The World Club Series is now a club international event. I think they are dipping their toe more in the water. We just need the brand, don't we?
I was going to say, is that good enough to have club international?
No,
we
it's
need
a
country
start.
against country.
It's a start.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, how much coverage does county cricket get? Virtually none. And yet Test match cricket is massive. How much coverage does rugby union, club rugby union get? You know, some, but it's the international game.
Well, we're about
and
to
that
see,
we've not. Why have we not got that international game?
We're about to see it, aren't we, in rugby union? It's going to dominate the headlines for 6 weeks, starting next month. The Rugby Union World Cup, climaxing at Twickenham, and it's going to be what people are talking about in the media.
And the limit of what we're doing is announcing Brian McDermott as the new USA coach.
Yeah.
But that is a World Cup. The interesting thing is that our next World Cup in 2017 is in Australia and New Zealand, and very possibly Papua New Guinea as well, which would be fantastic. That would be a new footprint to the World Cup. It'd be very interesting to see how seriously the Aussies take and promote that tournament, because that could be a springboard. Just as an aside,
in terms of media profile and all the rest of it, the same night as the grand final, England play Uruguay across the road at the Etihad. I'll tell you what will get the column inches. Unfortunately, it'll be the international dimension of England playing Uruguay in the World Cup as opposed to a Super League grand final.
Yeah, pin an international badge on anything. and it attracts people's interest because people can buy into that, can't they? People, it doesn't matter whether they know where St Helens is or Hulkingston Rovers is. England is a concept they can buy into.
Ashes cricket, isn't it?
So everybody.
We all keep
plays.
saying it, Dev. I mean, the best thing that could have happened or should have happened for the international game was New Zealand putting the Aussies in the place, relegating them to number 2 in the world. The Aussies keep talking up the fact that they're going to put that right, and they're going to. I understand there are some announcements coming up in the next few weeks that should address their international vision going forward, vis-a-vis the Kangaroos, but it won't be before time.
Yeah, but interesting with Jeff Tuvey, he's obviously stuck his hand up. You know, I mean, he's out at it's funny, isn't he? He's out at Manly now, and ever since that announcement, they've got better and better and better. And they absolutely thumped the Rabbitohs at the weekend.
And
they could be in the 8, but Jeff Tuvey stuck his hand up. But Tim Sheens is still the Australian coach, but there's got to be a shift in that.
I think it's interesting as well that Brisbane are the top club this year. Wayne Bennett's the coach. He's an internationalist. I think behind the scenes he'll be wanting to sprinkle some international stardust. But are we going to get the first all-Queensland grand final over in the NRL this year?
Well, it would be
played in Sydney, which would be interesting.
Yeah, Souths are going to have a big say on that, obviously, still.
Roosters. All of the top 4 lost, apart from the Roosters at the weekend. Yeah. And you've got Cronulla, who last year couldn't buy a win at all, and the beginning of this season looked absolutely hopeless. I think they've won 8 out of the last 9 now. They're into 5th.
Yeah.
So that is a vibrant top 8 where anybody can beat anyone on the day. The Roosters are going for the 3rd minor premiership in a row. You'd have to say they're outsiders to it still.
They've won 8 on the trot though. I think we talk about hitting form at the right time. I think they just could be the team at the moment.
But the Bunnies are missing Sam, aren't they? I mean, they you know, what's he prior? Umpteen tackles, umpteen hit-ups. Yeah. You know, he's the fulcrum of that side, and I think without him they don't look quite as formidable.
Well, who would? Who would? Because for my money, he was the best rugby league player on the planet.
Yeah. Cronulla, do you put that into the coach? Back in harness, back in the hot seat after a year out?
I think some players as well have got a bit of a point to prove as well about the way they were treated.
They had a shocking injury listed. You know, and Paul Gallen, he is still one of those guys that, you know, he plays 18 minutes. He puts heart and soul.
He's one of those guys eventually. He's going to turn up in Super League, isn't he?
Well, he said he fancies it, doesn't he? You know, and you'd have to say he'd be welcome with open arms, but there can't be that many miles left on his clock, can there, Phil?
You wouldn't have thought so. Not the way he plays the game, and the fact that he gave everything to Origin as well. But I just think you mentioned Manly. They're the real wild card. If they can get into the 8, no one will want to play them in the playoffs.
Nobody likes playing at Brookvale Oval against them either,
no,
really.
Absolutely.
Because they weren't playing there for a while this year, were they? And they had the problem with the halves, you know, and the fact that Cherry Evans was leaving, and
there was all that discontent, and you know, they let Glenn Stewart go, which was frankly unbelievable.
Yeah.
They've still got Jamie Lyon, who's still a class act, isn't he? You know,
he's still the best centre in world rugby for me.
How old is he now, Jamie Lyon? He must be
48.
48, yeah.
He's nearly Stanley Jeans' age.
However old that might be. So who's your money on? Who's your money on in the NRL?
I think it could be a Brisbane Roosters final. And I just fancy the Roosters. I think they might just be able to do it.
I wouldn't be surprised if those were the 2 teams, but I am going with Brisbane.
I think so. I think Wayne Bennett has got something that no other coach in world rugby today has, and he has just absolutely waved the wand up there. And I can't see beyond Brisbane this year.
Yeah, Thurston, Cowboys.
I think Jonathan Thurston's. He's one of those you've got to tune in to watch North Queensland Cowboys just to watch him play.
But when he has a bad day, and he had a bad day at the weekend,
he did.
Then it's a little bit like Danny Brough at Huddersfield.
Yeah.
There isn't much of a plan B.
What do you reckon, Jonathan Thurston joining the Immortals? Because I just think he's the best thing I've seen since Darren Lockyer, who I rate as the best player I've ever seen. Yeah. And I think Jonathan Thurston...
He wasn't in Andrew John's class, and none of them were in Wally Lewis's.
I'd pay you
well, to quote Chris Sandow, they all had good players around them, those guys, didn't they? They didn't have to do much to win games in the old days. That's just about as far as we go for this week, but let me tell you what's coming up on this channel over the next weekend. You'll have watched earlier the Cowboys against the Rabbitohs. Hope you enjoyed that game. But coming up tomorrow, live game at 10:45, the Broncos against the Dragons at Suncorp Stadium. Check out the Broncos pedigree. Tomorrow, Tigers against the Knights at Campbelltown, 6 a.m. live. Also, Saturday morning, Panthers against the Warriors. That's 8:30 at the Pepper Stadium live. And the third match on the Saturday, the Roosters against the Eels at the Allianz Stadium, 10:30. That's also live here on Premier Sports. Sunday, the 16th of August, 2 games. Raiders against the Sea Eagles, 5 a.m. live. Sunday the 16th also, Bulldogs against the Titans, the Central Coast Stadium, at 7 a.m. also live. And the final live game of the weekend, or early into the Monday morning, you can watch this, take the morning off work. It's the Sharks against the Storm at 10 a.m. and that's live as well. And you can check out all that information plus a whole lot more on the website www.premiersports.tv. Don't forget the S at the end of sports. So that's as far as we go for this week. Our thanks to Danny, to Phil and to Chris. But make sure you tuned in a fortnight's time. We've got 3 real heavy hitters joining us here in the Arc at Headingley. Gary Hetherington, the Chief Executive of Leeds, Marwan Kukash, the owner of Salford, and Ian Lenigan, the owner and chairman of the Wigan Warriors. It should be quite a discussion. Make sure you're with us. 2 weeks' time. Goodbye.